Welcome back to Light Talk, where everyday people can share their spiritual journey experiences. If you have a story to share, go ahead and email lighttalk423 at gmail.com. And then while you're at it, click on your like, share, and subscribe buttons. Well, here we go. Let's have another fun, exciting time today. All right, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey, so I'm Dave Chametzky. I have a podcast, so that's the image in the background. For those who can see the image, it says Peace, Love, and Bring a Bat, which is a podcast. I'm a speaker, I'm an author. I'm coming out with a couple of books. I just came out with my first comic book, and that's who I am. I coach people in a lot of different ways. If they want to create their speeches, they want to create a book, or even get their own podcast. A lot of people don't know how to overcome limiting beliefs, and those are the things that I'm really good at and working through. And that's check me out as David Chametzky. It's great having a very unique last name. So that way you can't mess it up. It's not like a Dave Brown where you might see a lot of people. There's not too many David Chametskys. For better or for worse, the world might say.
Yeah, I've got the same type of last name too. So,
Yeah.
so go ahead and tell us some of your stories. I know you had some NDE stories for us.
Yeah, so I guess the most recent one is, and then I talk about because that's I was told. So I about 4 years ago, a little over 4 years ago, I tried to commit suicide. I tried to hurt myself, and during the active way I was doing it, I had heard a voice, and a voice, which is just a little disconcerting. The part about that is when I did try to kill myself, I wrote 50 letters to people who I was leaving behind to give them an explanation. It wasn't that you needed to talk to me, you should have said something nice to me. It was more along the lines I was doing this because I felt that that was my path. And ironically, it was my path because that led to me where I'm at now. But during
Right.
the active part, I heard it's not my time. Go back, and I didn't feel that I was already there. I just felt I was someplace. I don't know where I was, but go back, and you're supposed to talk to people about exactly this experience and mental wellness and the stuff that you already knew, but you needed to do it. You needed that one more experience to kind of shift the way to go. I see it as a different thing. We use some of the words like depression very easily, right? I'm depressed today. My team lost. I'm depressed. It's cloudy. It might be you're just sad versus a clinical depression. And for me, I was at the beginning stages of a clinical depression, for because of a lot of the things that were going on in my life.
Mhm.
But so while I was in it, and the experience was, I had heard this voice. It was a voice I had not known before. And when I asked the voice during the conversation, because I was like, "Who are you?" I wasn't sure which way I was going. It didn't feel warm, but it didn't feel, as peaceful as I've heard. Though, and they said Grandpa Mike, which I don't have a Grandpa Mike, or I guess now I've really heard the story enough times that, and I've been confirmed with friends who are mediums that I know who the Grandpa Mike is. It was through a marriage family. So, but it was somebody who felt the need to step up and tell me what I needed to do. And just to go back, it was something as simple as just going back. This is not you're kind of lost, go back the other way.
Here,
Yeah,
let me guide your hand. Let's go this way.
yeah. And being at that time, even 5 years ago, I was a mentor and a coach for many years, so I knew how to help people with some really heavy situations because I had already done it. I already knew the techniques that I had how to help people manage anxieties. Uh, you know, something like PTSD, so trauma-related memories.
Mhm.
And so I knew some serious things. But much like, and I use this example all the time, a lot of us have gym memberships, but we don't use the gym and we expect to get well. I knew for me then that what to do to help others. I didn't help myself. And I now know, and now no matter what I go through, and I've actually dealt with more serious things that I can handle it. And so so I hear this Grandpa Mike voice telling me to go back, and I'm like, nope, this is what I'm doing. I wrote 50 letters to people. I'm going forward. So when one method didn't work, I tried another method, obviously did not work. And then I tried a third method. And at one point, at that point is when I got my clarity back regarding the disconnect of reality. But I'm like there, and I said, okay, there's a lot of things you're not good at in life. And this is definitely one of them. You tried three ways. I mean, there were ways that if you're researched, and I won't go into discussing because I don't think anybody should try it, but
Right.
it was like, yeah, the success rates are high, for not me. But what I also want to say is those people who are thinking about it, 89% of people do not succeed. So there's a lot more people like that who have been out there. Only 11% statistically say are successful with suicide. So then I'm like, okay, and I closed my eyes for a little while, and Grandpa Mike was like, "I said, go back." It wasn't forceful. It was in a loving way. And then I'm like, okay, I'm embarrassed. There's levels of what do I do now, and you get into those positions, and
Yeah.
that was really one of the best stories of my life because it really made me rethink so many other things. And when talking to you earlier, I've had other feelings. I've even been able to be a medium, but then it scared me. So I've communicated with some thing with people throughout my life. During our green room talk, I mean, I had a girlfriend who was killed by a drunk driver, and which I didn't know I was carrying the survivor guilt, and she's trying to assist me through the grief of losing her because at that time, she was the love of my life, and I was planning on marrying her. And going through those things are really tough. But there was one point that I had this dream of me next to there was a couple of graves, open graves, and she goes, either get in or get out, and you don't belong here. So I've been told I don't belong there. I don't know if that means I don't belong in heaven or that nice place, but no, uh, so it's one of those things that you get those experiences. It really changes your mindset, and that one instance with the graveside also changed my mindset because at that time it was a couple of years of me grieving over this woman's death. It wasn't just right after. It was probably about 4 years out that I was grieving. I mean, I was a young kid. I think 19 or 20 when I had started that part of my journey. And what do you do
Yeah.
when you lose somebody that you believe you're going to spend the rest of your life with, and they're lost at the drop of a hat. I was the last person that spoke to her, and I had just seen her a week before for her own grandmother's funeral. She had flown back. She was going to college, and so we spent an emotional time together. It was one of the first few times we'd seen each other for a very long time because she was in school. And then, I get the call, the infamous call, hey, go over to Sandy's house. And that's really what it was. And then I walked into the house and everybody's mourning. And I'm like, all right, they're sad because, they just lost a grandmother and things like that, not
Oh.
knowing the, the, the weight of what I was about to hear and the devastation.
Yeah.
And the weird part about it, she had a premonition her whole life. And even though it was a young life, she knew she was going to die early. I hadn't mentioned that to you before on the interview. It just came to me, so I know I'm supposed to say something. She had a premonition on it, and she even went to therapy. Like her parents were concerned, and she was very comfortable with it. In fact, how that ties
Oh,
into
wow.
when I tried my suicide attempt, I was very comfortable. I was as comfortable as you can be. I wasn't one of those people who was like, "Oh no, the world hates me." I was at peace. That's why I wrote those 50 letters because I that put me in a mindset of peace and to make sure that the people who I left behind, which nobody has seen those 50 letters. I had those letters shred afterwards, so nobody can misinterpret it. And then now I'm much more vocal to people. You know, if I like you, I like you. If I don't, I'll say, can we have a conversation about what it's feeling like for me? And I think that's really part of this, NDE stuff is that the communications become much more real for us when you've experienced something like that.
Wow. Wow. I'm sure you have a whole different viewpoint of life and everything. Just because of the experience. I mean, the experience is just kind of amazing, I'm sure.
Yeah, it definitely was. It definitely has shifted my life. So, to know that I wanted to be off, I was comfortable beforehand about the thought of my not being here, but at that time, I didn't know um, that the biggest question that I got asked, one of the first questions I got asked after my suicide attempt was, "Do you love yourself?" And I paused. And then I paused a little bit more, and then I started crying because I came to the realization I didn't love myself. Though I was okay with passing on, I didn't realize it was a coming from a place of pain versus a place of love. See, like today, if you ask me, do I love myself? I don't have to pause. The answer is yes. I love myself in a lot of different ways. I don't like some of the decisions I made in my past, but that's where the rear view mirror is much smaller than the windshield, and we just look going forward. But I also know that I'm also at peace that if today was my last day, I would also be at peace with going to wherever I would go, but I'm not looking to go to do that. I'm not looking, like when just recently I've been transitioned out of corporate America and everybody's worried about me and I can say I'm fine. And they call me up and I'm like, I'm telling you, in fact, another, I don't want to say it's not a near death experience, but
Right.
it's a God praying, and while I used to say I'm not religious, I've become more religious, but not necessarily to one specific faith. I just believe there's a universal energy or God. I don't mind calling it God. Um, that when you really pray at times, if you're really giving yourself up and surrendering, God does answer. It doesn't necessarily give you the $1 million, but it gives you an answer that you were looking for. So as I was transitioned, I started applying for other jobs to go back to corporate America, and none of them were successful. I'm a little older than the average new employee. So there
Right.
was concerns about that, even though the jobs didn't say that. They were like, "Well, you have a lot of experience, but not in the area we want." And I'm like, "Yeah, I do, but I didn't even get an interview on that." That's the feedback. So if they don't give you an opportunity to speak about it, I always feel that there's other stories behind it.
Yeah.
And so I prayed. I prayed really hard. I cried. I was like, "Show me what I need to do." And I was brought into the right place. I was brought back to a place. I mean, the past experiences since I've left corporate America have been amazing. I mean, including you. We didn't meet really for within the past month. It
Yeah.
just is like all these opportunities, and it's because I've handed over back to God to show me exactly what I was doing and what I could be doing to bring me to that next level. And there's so many pieces of that have come to my clarity. And once you can get that clarity and meet the right people with the clarity, every door I open opens three more doors, and I'm just continue to be blessed. And that's all I keep saying is I feel almost like a repeated too much. Some of my friends are like, "Man, you weren't this religious, a while ago." I go, "I'm not that religious." I get defensive about it because I'm not the most pious person. I don't follow all the tenets, but God knows what's in my heart. And I think
Yes.
that's more important with anything that we do going forward is God knows what's in your heart. If your heart, if you're looking to try to get over on somebody, then God knows that as well. And right now in my stage in life, I'm not looking to get over. And I'm glad that Grandpa Mike told me to come back and I listened.
Yeah.
right? I didn't have to listen. It's still free will. We have free
Right.
will in every parts of our life. And what has happened, let me, also want to tell people. So I was at the darkest point of my life, or among the darkest points of my life. But Grandpa Mike came to me. I listened to him. I followed, just doing what and then he hasn't given me instructions, except every now and then he comes to me in dreams and he says, he shows me flowers, like these bright yellow roses, and I know who he wants me to give it to, and I send it out. I don't sign my name on a card. I just put it out there because that's what I'm being told, and he appreciates it. I got to pay
Yeah.
back. And so not only do I talk about it, but since then I've been a TEDx speaker. I've published a number of books. I have my podcast, which is a, internationally ranked podcast. So, there really is an opportunity of what we use our near-death experiences are, or what experiences. There's been hundreds of people that I've helped and guided through it. And, with my TEDx talk, it wasn't my best performance, but the best thing I really enjoy about it is the fact that um, I had 9 families that reach out to me, 7 of which were actually thinking about suicide, and I was able to guide them into where they should go for help, and I guided them. I was with them through that experience, and I'm not a therapist, so I can help in some ways. But if you need a little bit more, I know my lane when I work
Right.
on things like that. And then there were 2 people whose families members had just been successful, and they just want to understand, and they asked me would I be willing to share, and I said I didn't mention it in the TEDx, but I was like, I have to. I was
Yeah.
told I have to, and it's my right to do that. I try to, when I some people say you're a little vague sometimes. I'm like, well, there's a lot of reasons for being vague. One of it is I'll never
Yeah.
talk about how I did it. I don't want anybody to copy what I do. But two, also, if there's other people in my life that were affected or would be part of that story, it's not my part of the story. I feel like it's only obligated to tell my side of the story. And, it really is about success, what you can do when you rise yourself out of the ashes, which is one of the things I talk about.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. I mean, with one of the other pieces of really interesting, and I don't know if it's not a near death experience, but it is a supernatural experience. So at the time when I broke down and everything, I built myself. I knew what to do. We had the pandemic shortly thereafter, and the worst thing that happened to me is being left alone. That was my biggest fears, and I obviously we all were left alone, or might have been left alone. And I took that solace into writing all the books that are coming out now. You know, you turn if when you're able to turn a bad situation or see the good in a lesson. That's the trick that with God or life is the test comes first, the lessons usually come second. We learn from our lessons, we learn from our pain, and by doing that, that's where we make those decisions. And one of my decisions recently in 2022, almost to the day, I don't know when this episode's coming out, but February 10th, 2022, my best friend passed away unexpectedly, alone in his apartment. And we had to break into his apartment to identify. I was the one who identified his body. Um, and then, what happens? He had no brothers, and, there was some cousins who nobody lived in the city. Um, and he had an 80-year-old mother who had Alzheimer's. And so I always used to say to him, "Don't worry, I got you." And again, this was unexpected. He wanted to go away, and he was afraid who would watch his mom. And I said, "I got you." So what do I do? This is a moment in our lives, much like that Grandpa Mike moment for me, is to see who I really am. And I knew he was gone, so I didn't have to. I didn't have to keep my word. It's when we keep our word, that's really what happens. And doing that, I was able to be with this woman for the next 6 months. So as she's transitioning, and I sat with her literally during her final moments on this plane. And the greatest story where I could tie this into a spiritual moment, it was a bright sunny day when we buried her in August, and there was one lightning bolt. that literally came down. This we all talked about it. It came down at 1:11 on that Tuesday afternoon. So I'm like looking at it. I'm like, okay, did I see it? Did I make it up? We get out and we come from a Jewish faith. The rabbi's like, did anybody see that lightning bolt? And I'm like, thank you, because I had just asked my girls who were in the car. I was like, did you see it? What? See what? Because they're all on their phones. And I go, okay, maybe I'm just crazy. And since that moment,
Yeah,
I've used that moment is like, yeah, even though the bodies aren't there, their souls were together. And to me, that was the most beautiful part of the experience, being through there that I knew. Because if you want to talk about love stories, there was no greater love story than my friend Kevin and his mom. And, not to saying that anybody doesn't care about their parents,
right.
but his dad had passed over, transitioned very young, and so since a very young kid till 55, the his mom was his world. I was blessed to travel with them at times and see that love, and when you're part of that, it's being pure love is just so incredible.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know how this would relate, but I've had the voice come to me, and they said their name to me, and that felt really, really nice. And then another time I was laying in bed, and I just heard the word group. I don't know what that means or anything, but just group. And I have never heard a word that was so loving, so
Yeah.
clear, and so beautiful that I just wanted to hug it so tight. It was just,
Yeah,
it was amazing.
I understand this. When Grandpa Mike, I've never met this gentleman physically, and when he's talking to me, but it was a calming
Right.
fatherly voice, like, but and I'm like, that's why I asked, who are you? Like,
Yeah.
I'm sort of, you can use it as a joke, and I do joke about it at times, but I didn't expect, if it was God, be like, hey, it's God, but
Right.
it was Grandpa Mike, and I was like, okay, and I just went with it because I knew it was a loving energy that I knew, and that was really powerful because
Right.
it was somebody who I didn't know, and it was really an episode of full trust that no matter what was going on, I trusted the process.
Yeah. Yep. And that's so cool too. When I believe I kind of started my journey uh, when I worked at a job, and I really did not like the job. It was a long drive to get there, and I have a friend from high school. She would always try to get me to listen to a specific station, and I'm like, yeah, yeah, whatever, blah blah. Here she goes again with her religion, blah blah blah. And then I listened to the radio to that station on my way to work that morning, and I didn't hear a word except for the very last second, just before I got out of the car. I heard "Steal My Show" by Toby Mac. And ever since then, it was like I threw my hands up, and I was like, okay, lead the way. I can't do this on my own. Take it.
Yeah, no, I think there's so many signs that we see, and that's where at times I'm still skeptical, right, about the signs we see, the experiences, and then there's times I'm like, no, this is exactly what it is,
Yeah.
and I could believe it or not believe it. So here I'll give you another story about Kevin and his mom. So nobody goes to visit their, their last spaces, and they're not next to each other for just really uh, logistical reasons. We weren't able to get the plot. Kevin didn't have one. He was young. He didn't wasn't
Right.
expected. But I go and visit Kevin, and I'm there, and I feel the chills, and I go, I know you don't care that he's there. He didn't. He's like me. I'm like, cremate me. I don't care. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter where my soul will live on. It doesn't matter
Right.
where my body is. Don't
Yeah.
worry about the body. Focus on the thing. And then I go visit his mom, and I had taken pictures of exactly where they are in the cemetery, like the street, how I can remember.
Uh-huh. Right.
Couldn't find the place. Even though I took the street, I'm like, I'm right here. I'm missing something. And then I saw a cat. And I've never seen a cat at this is a recent story. I've never seen a cat at the cemetery. I've been at those cemeteries because that's where a lot of my family is, just sitting there. And I go back and I go, so I stop the car. I pull over, stop the car. I go, I know I'm in the right place. This stupid cat, and they weren't cat people, they were dog people. So it wasn't
Yeah.
even that, like they love cats. I didn't find the cat, but I did find it was exactly where the cat was, where I believed I saw the cat. Um, and I'm like, again, it's one of those stories that I enjoy talking about because you just don't know. But then it gets
Right.
even better. Then I'm driving out and I'm still thinking about them, and it was both their birthdays within a week of each other. So I was celebrating that, and that's why I really went. And then I saw a car in front of me, and it was a different state's license plate, and it had their initials with a number. It wasn't 30.
Oh my
And I
goodness.
was like, it said KWF. So Kevin with Fran is how I read it. Like, I'm
Uh,
like, and it applies to them. And the numbers didn't really, I don't recall them off the top of my head. I don't think they were, but I was like, KWF. What did I just do? I literally just had gone to Kevin's grave and Fran's grave, and if that's not a sign to me, again, we can read
yeah.
into it. I'm taking it that they were just letting me know that they're together, and they thanked me for visiting.
Right. And that's all that needs to happen is
Yeah, it's for me,
it's for
right?
you. Only for
Yeah,
you. Nobody else would even
yeah,
think twice about it.
yeah. No, and
Definitely.
I think that's the beautiful part of people with near death or spiritual experiences. If it's important to you, don't worry.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that I take back from my experience with the suicide is that I had to tell my kids what I was doing, what I did. And that was why my performance for the TEDx wasn't as great. I woke up in the morning, I was all prepared, and then I said, wow, once I say this, I can't put the cat in the bag. I can't hide.
Can't
Up
hide.
until
Right.
that point, some people knew what I experienced, but nobody really knew, like the world didn't know. I could have kept it secret. I could have just gone in my little shade, but Grandpa Mike told me people need to hear your message. And like I said, uh, contacted 9 times, 7 times were people who really needed that experience. And I was able to add value to their lives. And at least, I haven't kept up in touch with them, but at least for that moment, their lives were just a little bit better. So we don't know what happens and how it happens, but we know that it happens when we really look into it and when you can surrender and move forward in trusting what it makes for you.
Yeah. Yeah. I believe that. And so many things have happened to me that's like, well, that doesn't mean anything. Like here lately, it's been numbers. It's
All
been
the time.
numbers everywhere.
Yeah, all the
Everywhere.
time, numbers again, I don't try to fit in. I don't try to make me get right. I'm
Right.
like, stuff that just comes up, you're like, what? How did that happen? And why today out of all days? And how the connection is, when I'm
Right.
thinking of certain things. And there is scientific background of when you're thinking of something, if you're looking for red cars and you then see only red cars, but
Right.
but again, I go back to that point. If it makes me happy, I'm not telling you to believe, or I'm not telling any of your listeners to believe me. But you want to know something? You can believe what you want. I'm not here to fight
Right.
anybody for it.
Nope.
I know what I've experienced, and because I've experienced it, it's real to me.
Right. Right. And that's all that matters.
Yep.
All right. Well, our time is just about up.
Yep.
So I so appreciate your time with us today. And oh, it's just so neat to hear everyone's stories. It's just so awesome. And I'm just so glad that you were able to spend some time with us today.
Okay. Well, thank you for the opportunity. I
Of
really
course.
appreciate it. I love talking about all the different stories that are in my life that has made me who I am.
Yeah. And that's why I'm here. So you can tell those stories. Well, thank you so much and thank you for joining me.
Okay, be well. Thank you so much.
Uh-huh.